Nipa gunle namdol shin yunde gungi genpa bo simjin gungi nyen jiko tamje genla gun chanse. Omen jagi genpa dane dusum sange gungi ngobo ni rasim chigo ngosmadan zebe. Savela me shabla suva ende. Dambiche nyamsulembi kulung sampo tarba topdeki samba ngijung dang janjubki simdang tembe koni dambiche nyamsulembar shu.
Let's start by arousing the most excellent, pure motivation, that of the mind of renunciation and the mind of awakening, bodhicitta. And then in that spirit, let's listen to the Dharma and actually put the Dharma teachings into practice.
Anzo che nyamsulen sedu lamki rimbachi la teni nyamsulen gugore teni dinde yindu nang zu chachi malam nang la tensha beki lamki rimba de la lobjan changyore.
When it comes to practicing the Dharma, we need to follow the path. And by following the path, we actually need to do it progressively, step by step. And so we need to know the stages of the path so that we can actually practice the Dharma correctly. And that's what we are studying here in these Dharma sessions. We are looking at the stages of the path.
Teni na tanda kapsu babe chagya chimbo ki lukso la sana mendo chachi malam ki kapsu la ani lam ki rimba dusu dawote la denda namba nga dawochi ki koni sungsha yore. Teni dade nani kasa nga zu denda tangbo lam di duyo wala thomar ten punsun soba di tini lu den dang sim den la sopa kande chiko yore se di ta tenzo inji minji nebar tu chang ko yore se di shu simbare nipa teni lam dende di rangyu la kebar cheba am tokbar cheba la ani tokche shirap namba sumgi rimba shindu teni jini doku yore suni ta deko la khasam gebar shubare.
Speaking of the stages of the path, here we are primarily concerned with the path of Mahamudra, the Great Seal practice. And when it comes to the path, it consists of 5 points, 5 stages. We have already looked at the first one, which is the excellent support. The point that explains that we all need to possess kind of proper physical body support to practice the Mahamudra and also the mental support. And so we covered that. The second stage is concerned with the 3 types of wisdom that we need to engender in order to realize the path. right, to kind of give rise to that understanding of the path in our mind stream. And I have extensively explained that second stage of the path, right, the how to give rise to the three types of insight or wisdom.
드니 나 가장 아주 타말라 검중기 셰랍세디 곰고 그레스 드니 셈기 네로디 또고 그레스 순용도 드니 다 셈기 네로디 또비 림바다고디 아니 숨다고지 상기기 셈라 셈마치데 셈예랑신 우사바오 세디다 딘데기 림바치기 강라 드베코니 아니 셈르베 닐로디 시에고거라 곰고거라 림바딘데신 드고거레스니다 디가상 디나니 내가 제버다고지 아정이 거야다고지 차그도와
And so the second stage, the one that explains the three types of wisdom, well, let me rephrase that. Well, at the end of explanation of this stage, we have covered again extensively the third type of wisdom, the one that arises from our practice of meditation, right? I spent a few Dharma sessions explaining the way that kind of steps to realize the nature of mind. That's the meditation there, right? The practice of meditation in Mahamudra comes down to realizing the nature of the mind. And as I have pointed out, was the way to approach some kind of realization of nature of the mind again consists of three steps, three stages, right? It's a gradual approach based on the Buddha's teachings himself, who said, as for the mind, there is no mind. The nature of mind is luminosity. We need to realize, we need to meditate on nature of the mind following these three steps. As for the mind, there is no mind. The nature of the mind is luminosity. So I really wanted to emphasize that that was the most crucial kind of point from the previous teachings on this wisdom that comes from meditation.
다 드링드니 숨바 돈다 숨바들이 나 돈다 숨바들라 이 가르송어레서나 출매기 람닐라 면바스 다 돌되나 다 딘데기 람세디다 간데질레스기요레 대양드니 만으로 왔다 마틀베 람디 간데직 인고거레세다 데코랑기 람기 ngo디 땡샤바 임바송사 달라드니 출매기 람스니
And today we're moving to the third stage of the path of Mahamudra, the one that explains the very essence of the path in itself. Really, this third point here has everything to do with what is the unmistaken correct path, right? What constitutes this kind of path that we can follow that will be absolutely perfect, not mistaken, correct? What's the kind of the essence of that path, right? That's what we will be looking at this particular stage of the path.
다디 지제디드니 쇼비나라 다제 다달 딩이 시든 도쿠르 다달 총이 람조게 시시 다달 딩이 데토비 고주 메베초당 테프레쇼세 지제디기 드니 람디 띵거래.
And once again, we will be looking at the Mahamudra aspiration prayer at next verse that will and explain what is the essence of this kind of unmistaken, unerring path. So the verse 6 then reads, "Through the ground of the two truths, free from the extremes of eternalism and nihilism, and through the supreme path of the two accumulations, free from the extremes of exaggeration and denial, may we attain the fruition of the two benefits, free from extremes of samsara and nirvana, and so meet with the unerring Dharma.
Dadi sijedi ani ngana so namba sanje beke lamgi jidom raw si chadi gare ji dom raw.
This verse from the Mahamudra Aspiration Prayer is actually a summary, very kind of a general overview of the whole Buddhist path.
Dadi tsekang re kitini donda re tungyore tsekang dangpo di kitini shi tembare tsekang nipa di kitini tsekang dangpo di ki tulme ki shi ani tsekang nipa di ki tulme ki lam ani tsekang sumpa di ki tulme ki debu sini tante latini azu namgyu yonra ki tanya latini shidang lamdang debu sini dus namsha chigarwa.
Each line of this verse points out to its own topic. Right? The first line explains what is the unmistaken ground of the Dharma. The second line explains what is the unmistaken path of the Dharma. And the third line explains what is the kind of unmistaken correct fruition of the Dharma. Right? And this is a very general framework you're probably well aware of. In the Dharma, right, we have this threefold structure: the ground, path, and fruition. So those three, therefore, explained in those lines of this verse.
Teni ta dela namgyu ngaran su kareyang segeresena shi uma lam uma debu uma sini namgyu ngaran uma segerwa uma chenyi bas dati labwe kimchen karesena shi kapsula tanda dela tani sunyong gore tani la lungu yo mare cheza uma chegore dega na shinge lamge kapsula tani debu kapsula tani sene tani ni sumore tende ke thala malung we ke ani niluji cha de ge yoba indi dela shi uma lam uma debu uma sene doseyang aju namgyu tani chegore.
And we also use the other type of terminology to further explain this threefold structure. We actually say the ground of the middle way, the path of the middle way, and the fruition of the middle way. So why do we say middle, right, in relation to the ground, path, and fruition? Well, because when it comes to the ground, path, and fruition, in all of those kind of topics, we really reach we realize the correct and mistaken ground, correct path, correct fruition when we avoid the two extremes. And so at the time of the ground, there are two specific extremes that we need to be careful not to fall into, right? And so when we don't fall into those extremes, we say, well, this is the correct ground of the middle way, middle path, right? So again, when it comes to the path itself, again, there are other two extremes that we need to be avoiding and not falling into. And when we succeed in that, we can say that this is the path of the middle way. And same for the fruition. So in all of those stages, again, there are two extremes that we need to watch out for. And that's why we use the specific terminology in relation to the ground, path, and fruition, the one of the calling them the middle way.
Tadi nala tini dordina shidang lamdang debu di la tini 레레라 노르사 니니요레 송바레 제온두다 dombe게 노르사 둑 데니 덴데게 노르사 둑 덴술레 당아주 골사당 축사 노르사스나 둔다지 거라봐 강릉기 탈라 룽송와이나 골송와레 축송바레 데니 덴주 둑부 강게양 기타라 말롱밤 대 왕도 마송월치니 위레 네투바이나 아능아란수 그 람디 골주메비 그 람지 차과레 스네 조다디 만줄라 골사기 람디 가레 임바당 아니 텔라 도규메바지 아니 가수바비게 도사 노르사 두고델라 아니 마쇼르바지 아주 제고 그래 세디드니 골주메비 람 출메기 람 스니 도스코알린 고거래
In relation to the ground, path, and fruition, in relation to each of those 3 points, there are 2 ways that we can go astray. When it comes to the ground, realizing, resolving what is the ground of the Dharma, there are 2 traps that we might become caught in, or 2 pitfalls, or 2 ways to go astray. We can call, there are different ways to address it, right? But they all point out to basically 2 wrong paths that we might take. And so we need to be really careful to avoid that and stay in the middle. Again, when it comes to the path and to the fruition, again, there are these, 2 pertaining to the path, 2 kind of traps, 2 wrong ways, 2 pertaining to the fruition. So altogether, you could see that we have 6 wrong paths or 6 pitfalls, 6 traps. Again, we have different terms, but they're all synonymous here. Obviously, something that we absolutely have to be careful about and to avoid so that we do remain in the middle. And when we remain in the middle, then we can say, well, that's the unmistaking, unerring Dharma, unmistaking ground, unmistaking path, unmistaking fruition.
디제디 시간 당부디기 시버자와 시 닐룰라 아니 마틀루와티 덴데지 연구거레스니 디템바레 아니 제가 이바디기 덴데기 닐룩디 둡지기 람 냠수 레용베 갑술라 아니 마틀루와티 덴데지 연구거레스 템바레 아니 제가 숨바디기 덴데기 람디 냠수 레용디 아니 숨바 데부 두바 투와 메바티 아니 덴데지 연구거레스니 나디팅도와
Right. Shidi matulpeshi tokparchep.
당보디 시제 시 닐룩라 마툴루바 니바디 둡지 길람 냠린라 마툴루바스 숨바디 두비 데불라 마툴루바스
So in the first line of the verse here, the Mahamudra's Praveshan prayer, the author identifies what is the ground of all phenomena that need to be known, right? The phenomena, something that we need to realize, to know. So what's the kind of ground, unmistaken ground of all phenomena? In the second line, what we learn is what is the unmistaken path of what path that we need to practice, right? That needs to be realized. What is a mistaken path that we need to put into practice? And in the third line, the text explains what is the unmistaken fruition, the one that will be achieved once we practice that path, right? Once we understand the ground of all phenomena in the correct way and proceed to really put that into practice during the path, what will be the result that will be attained? What's the unmistaken result? So again, they're all connected with each other, and then what we learn is the proper way to understand what is the ground, path, and fruition.
다 대양 고대부제나 시 데니 숨주 람 소니 숨주 데부 꾸니 숨주 스니 다 도스라 샤바이나 돈다 도도다고 디레 시에고야디.
And what we need to remember, and of the main point, is that in summary, we can say the ground is the union of the two truths. The path is the union of two accumulations, and the result is the union of two bodies or two kayas.
다 캔나 뭐 럽존 장게 있는 양 갖고는 아주 뒤 탄이리 도스 거림 남당 제당도 어디 미라유도 양 truksegirba pena ngaju lam gi namsha je de mangche ba de yana tanda de sumwana shin shi lam debu yana tawa komba choba se de yongre de denzu di chitang tawa komba choba sani won yongre yene yanda shilam de sum se dan takom che sum se de chig mindawa yena yang denla keba chumba yo mare pena tawa se di danda dekapsula shi se shtowa o didang chipare didang dewa yode bashire deni gomba dan choba se di deni danda di lam se dang chiparwa den kapkabla tawa gomba choba trebu shagere da trebu di chipacha de dwa tin de da dinzu dos ko lam gi namsha che dang gi gorim tis mindawa ma do danda di chipa yimbaji.
And some of you who have already studied the Dharma perhaps encountered these kind of structures, frameworks, like a ground, path, and fruition. Or another one, also very well known, is the view, meditation, and conduct. And sometimes the fourth point added there, which is fruition, like view, meditation, conduct, and fruition. So you might wonder, but is there a difference, right? What is this actually? What are those terms really? In reality, it's just a slightly different emphasis, or maybe like we can say the kind of gurim, like order, the time when we sometimes encounter one set and sometimes another set, but in reality, even though it's different terms, they really point out to the same thing. There's not a big difference between those different sets of terms and ideas, of course. In the Dharma, for example, if you look at the view, meditation, conduct, and fruition, the view there is exactly what here we have explained as the ground, right? They are very much connected, actually kind of almost the same. The view of the Dharma is same as the ground. Then meditation and conduct, it refers to the path, right? In another set, here, the one that was second point is the path. That's meditation conduct. Well, and fruition, it's the same name, yeah? Both sets have fruition. So again, sometimes we might get a little bit confused because it's different words, but actually we should understand it's not a very big difference, just there is a different times when we use one set or another set.
Deni ta ta chedang shilam desum ki kola keje shiang du kya chumbo yore namba sanje begata shi kapsula rimba mangbo chengi yawa namdang la so ba tadu ki keje sheba ena da dun shira kya chumbo she yore kasha la so ine yanda tanda nganzu kasu ba ba di dine keje shege yo mare ta ngaran zo chi 서서 곰 갸용도 되니 엔테가 속에 되니 딱지당 도그르세 된저 간디치를 선로다니 냠닌 제국의 선도되는 나라서 다다 스스글라 제 대도당 랭이라서와 나와 망고지 샤르디거와 다 대가랑라디니 딱지당 도그르당 덴데 선로다메 거니 아니 시당 람단 테부 세도 거와디 랑데나 디디거래 대따르기 깨져나시 천이 예와당다 되니 망보디 가침보디 선로다메 거바지.
Generally, we can find quite extensive, elaborate explanations on what constitutes the ground of the Dharma, what is the path, fruition, right? Especially when it's in the context of studying philosophical schools of Buddhism. Each of the school itself presents different understanding what is the ground, right? What is the nature of phenomena, in other words. What are the different definitions, divisions, lists? I mean, you can study for a long, long time just the ground, right? Learning it from different perspectives, from different philosophical tenet systems, and same for the path. Many stages, divisions, explanations, enumerations, and so on and so forth. So here, in the context of Mahamudra practice, we are not concerned with those very philosophical, elaborate explanations of the ground, path, and fruition, but rather something that has to do with our own personal experience. Like we all have this kind of, we all have experiences, right? Appearances present themselves all the time to us. And so here the question is, are we somehow walking through our path of through our life, are we somehow reifying those phenomena? Are we somehow believing that they are lasting and eternal, or maybe that they are not truly existent? In other words, are we falling into this kind of extreme ideas of eternalism and nihilism when it comes to just understanding phenomena around us? Same for the path. Again, when we deal with all these kind of experiences, are we somehow in denial? Are we denying their nature, true nature? Or are we exaggerating their true nature? So this is more the perspective that we are going to look at the ground, path, and fruition through the lens of the Mahamudra practice, right? Not very philosophical with a lot of terminology, details, lists, but more like personally, what are we doing, right, in our life? Are we really having these ideas of eternalism, nihilism, exaggeration, denial, and what it means for us then?
당보들와 시당 람당 데부스니 고림지 뒤샤도와 저기 고림디디니 규디기 대화다오래 닝이 그거래 베나 시당 람데 대화제 람당 데부긴 대화제 되니 시야고면나 람야고 용매 바당 람디 야고 마요는 데부디 야고 용매 바지 임바지 이 시디 마너와지 차서와이나 람 마너와 라싱기 차용기 여바지다 델라티니 데부얀티니 마너와지 라싱기 톱 용겨봐 다데 나네 게 치쇼디 다나간주 데부라 시라시라 섬로 마다는 디그래 나란수 냠린 제게는 쪼어디다 나 랑기 귤라 람 양다와지 용고고도 다디 용버 제발라티니 시디 양다와지 네버도 시에 고고도라 시에바짬지 마인바 물린 제도 바시다 디칼레레 기케체스 게다 딜 섬다 자든 제디 게주도와 아나 대화다 실람 됐으면 대화된 도시여 바지 당고 야고 ken고 그래
Khenpo di tsovadi shidin kajeimpa shene nyulenche gores.
Shidi penanda
Dichiksun.
sungjuk grace penandeni sungjuk grace ni lanzo lapta shigrwa.
Yes.
Diwa kunna len le lapta jap shigrwa. 이네 수수기 미세기 나라디 ngolin yang khabashirayo.
Nyolen kerangi injekitse correct?
Acceptance.
Um?
Acceptance.
Yeah, so
Accepting
okay, it's okay for acceptance. Yeah, okay. I was thinking lesson. Mm-hmm. So you can see that also from the verse itself and in general in this structure of ground, path, fruition, that there's an order. They always come in this order. Ground, path, and fruition. And this is for a special reason. Actually, the order shows the causal relationship between those three stages. Right? One is the cause, another one is the result. So the ground leads to the path leads to fruition. That's why this kind of sequence is important. Just as if we fail to understand what is the correct ground, our practice of the path won't be correct. And without the correct path, there will be no good, correct fruition. And same vice versa, if we do realize what is the unmistaken ground, really the unmistaken path will be understood automatically. It will be practiced automatically just from knowing the unmistaken ground. And once our path is unmistaken, again, automatically it will lead to proper, correct fruition. So there's this really strong bond between those three stages. At this point, we shouldn't be too concerned with the fruition, okay? Like, don't worry about fruition. But really, the most important is, at this point, is to start, right? At beginning with the ground, and not just to understand, meaning being able to repeat what is the ground, oh, it's the union of the two truths, right? Not to just know that kind of a formula intellectually, but to really accept it. So in our lives, do we integrate it with our lives? Are we really taking it to heart? That's the important question here.
당이 디세디 돈다데 가르스기 요레스나 아주 간디지는 걸린 지역거래 시딩이 숨주디. 답에 칭윤용 주슈바이나 소소라 빼지 야고다워지 차니 심라 가투슉 춤버지케니 excited 시우지 차바이네야 디디 람상 덴데기 excitement nangla nangi tukte hine yang denla ranshin mebare seji molinche ko gora over excited masa wachina nayang kap susula dunge damede nyungro ba lapor to sim gi dunga chumba damede tine lebyong de tine maranzo injikela masona it feels so real rigid to so yung do ba heavy te didi lamsang ta dunge jingala nang dukte ine yang ranshin matu bachre sini ta chi ko de bachena tende ki kherangi sosula misena la kange theyong de tu dang sangen la rwa ani over excited masa bache over disappointed masa bache ni nang la ranshin matu bachre sha sini kila de tu baina ani kherangi da danda di kareso gorwe shilata nyamlin je tu bare shilat ne tu bare nalin ta tu bare ko debu jena.
How can we make sure that we are integrating this, the ground, like accepting the ground as being the union of the two truths, really in our lives, not just in our intellectual understanding, but really we live that truth. We really live it, we breathe it. We all experience good and bad moments, right? All of us, we have happy moments, we have sad moments. This is given. So when something good happens and we feel really excited, overly, like too excited. And that moment, if we could really realize, understand deeply within our being, understand that all these happy moments, these happy experiences, they do appear. They are experiences. I do experience them. And nevertheless, they are not truly existent. They are shunyata, they are emptiness. So that there is really no point to get overly excited. When we feel unhappy and it feels so real, we feel so heavy, like we rigidly grasp to this like bad, difficult feelings inside us. Again, if we can remember and really realize that, well, all of this is really experienced by me, I'm not denying that experience does arise, and yet in its essence, it's not truly existent. It lacks that kind of solidity, right? It's not real, it's not true. Everything, and so we won't be overly depressed. Everything is that way, actually. All the good moments, bad moments, happy, sad. If we are able not to get overly excited or overly disappointed with those happy, sad moments in our lives, if we can remain in the middle, really, right? Equanimous, understanding that it indeed this experience takes place, but in essence, it lacks its intrinsic kind of nature. It's not truly existent. Then we can say, yes, we do accept the ground. We really live that unity of the two truths, not just intellectually, but really integrating it in our life.
다 kerangi mise nangla dedu dang sangen chasang tende sini chanyomni nyamlin chetu bayina tela chadang shushuma masho bayina ngone dani ki danga uma bayin slamne mingdin sunga chapare ngone dani ki uma ba and that di mado ani kerang uma bayin besedi danga uma bayin umanani tosho di in slab 아니 스스기 제 미세나라 상엔다 레토단 데주 샤랑도 아니 자상 데주 가와 티티지니 줄이 쇼르송 와이나 다디 원이 다니 우마바 주마스라고 샤송 말에 민점기 우마바.
And when we are indeed when we will be indeed able to remain equanimous at the moments of happiness or despair, when good things happen to us and bad things happen, when we remain in that middle, meaning that we don't give rise to particularly strong attachment and grasping or aversion or anger to whatever takes place in our life, we can say that now we are real madhyamikas, meaning we are really middle way practitioners. Not just on the paper, but really in its meaning, not just walking around with this kind of a card being a middle way practitioner. Sometimes people say, I am madhyamika, I am middle way practitioner, it's the highest view, I am then the follower of this highest philosophy. And then when things happen in life, people, fall into despair or overexcitement, over disappointment, having too much hopes or fears. Then if it's the case, maybe you can call yourself madhyamika, but in reality you are nothing but. So to be a real middle way practitioner, it's to actually in real life situations to remain equanimous, right in the middle.
Tadi yang tini kasang anju sim ngabut ni lu kyang ti kapsula sim machi de se sikni doa deni gi nyamlen na la ta duzule byong kare nawa di sim yimba ngisheke sim ran shim meba de ngishe ka zu shuk chombo jitu de zamgi ani tanda ka su ba be ge nge danji 나라 라시 메바세 된줄라 레라부 지니지 몰린지 도바 숑고레 다디 하마고 와지니디니 난킨당 낭세 율세디 타릉부질레 샤샤도 아니 딘줄라지 갈래가 보여래.
And this point that I'm making also very much connected to the teachings from the previous Dharma sessions, the kind of teachings on the nature of the mind. And remember, among those 3 steps to realizing the nature of the mind, the first 2 is first to understand there is the mind, and second, well, when it comes to the nature of the mind, it is emptiness, right? So as for the mind is empty. This is actually the practice of the unity of the 2 truths, right? The one that when we really live by that, we can say that we have realized the unmistaken ground. How so? Well, when we realize that all appearances are just the illusory display of the mind, and then the mind itself is emptiness, right? These 2 steps there, we can really accept them, accept easily this dance between the 2 truths, the relative and the ultimate truth, the ground. In other words, we will realize the unmistaken ground when we really practice in this way, understanding that everything that experienced and appearances is the mind itself, and mind itself lacks that true existence. Otherwise, if we really have a strong separation between the appearances and then the one who experiences them, right? It's like we feel it's too different. There's this world and this is me, and they're far, removed, kind of far away from each other. Then we're not dancing that kind of unity of the 2 truths. We're not accepting it, and thus we're not realizing the ground, right?
다 당봉 아주 실험 되심세디 다 고림이 단지 슈바나싱이 빼지 슈바이나 시세디 당 아주 지 행동 대부지를 빼샤와이나 행동디 당보 즉 사분지 고그러 봐 공부도 되게 된 다 된데 사분이라고 다 가르쳐 이거는 시세거래 되니 다 사분데 추단 류든지 야보 루용되더니 거야 공부도 되는 거리 행동라고 차도를 딜라람스라 바래 다 데부스디더니 행동 과란들라 때는 다도 롱스죄긴 데부시온 거로 봐 다 딜라 데부스니 랍쇼거래 빼도 상에 되기도 시디 사분다고 람디 행동다고 아니 데부디 그런 데부다고지.
And I wanted to give an example to illustrate this particular sequence or connection between the ground, the path, and the fruition. How are they really intimately linked? The example will be that of a fruit tree. So first of all, when we just from the very beginning want to have a fruit tree, we start with a seed. And we plant that seed, and that's the ground. Everything starts from that. If we don't have that seed, there will be no sprout, there will be no tree, right, to grow strong and healthy. So that's the beginning, starting point. That's the ground. Then we might help that seed to grow into a strong, healthy fruit tree by, of course, giving it water, adding some nice fertilizer, right? That we need to do some things to that seed, and that's the path. And so when we put water, fertilizer, so on and so forth, it becomes a tree. We see this fruit tree. And the fruition, well, that's when we already enjoy the fruits that fruit tree has yielded, right? So the seed, the tree itself, and the fruits of the tree. That's the ground, the path, and the fruition.
얘니 다 아주 지단기 남기인게 다양한테 고대와라고 제와이나 아주 남기되는 세계로 앞에는 당하로 지 레가라고 제와이나 프로젝트라고 제와이나 알아서 다지 비전 지어래 vision di dubar chebala dedang thumbe ke strategy ji so ko gar ni pa rwa ani strategy yoba chamji dige mare strategy dedang relevant thumba ke dini resources ko go wa 다 디지디 차장지 용수 조바 용발 제발 가르래 resources 고도 당보 니바디 strategy 약보지 쓰고도 순바디더니 리뷰 용도 비전디 사만하시 된다도 그러봐 다시당 람단 디부스에 대해 단연 딜러 잡아야는 빼샤봐야나 resources에 디 시다버래 strategy 디 람다버래 아니 비전디 데브다버봐 근데 직단 직을 대화치 못 차대기도 와
Inen dan su dampune Khenpogi vision sum pare. Tene dine gotsugna yana resources ne gotsugna. Kan sanken dam las kepra lasoti. Ti lasa. Also to make it even more easy to understand the ground path and the fruition, we can say that we can compare it to a project. And we start the project by envisioning what the result, what the end goal is, right? That's the vision, right? That's kind of just envisioning it. But then, where do we really start? We start by assembling relevant resources. That's where we start, and then we make a strategy. And then, if all goes well, we have these resources and strategy, that vision will be accomplished, will be realized, right? That's the result. So same, like with any project here, we can also say that this kind of resources, relevant resources, that's the ground. The strategy, that's the path. Well, and the vision that eventually becomes reality, right? That's the fruition.
알아서 페나 strategy 약보여나 resources 약보여나 랑싱기 strategy 레라고 자그와 되니 resources 거랑 약보면나 아니 strategy 망보 쓰나양 시라펜도 말와 라렌을 깨도 말해 내가 나싱에 단지 빼셔버 나싱 아주 사분디 약보여나 아니 행동대 랑싱 약보 용거래 사분디 약보면은 행동디 약보 용도고 말와 디지디다 아주 지당 택받침보당 학벌도 아주 벽이 낭된라다 배자 망보지 윤름보다 가라 가샤 망보지 제바 망보지 지디 나미 카시에게다 딘주 또저 갈라 그래 academic entertainment 소다 보지 그러와 근데 소르기도 와 다저바 잡다면서 제디 롱로 망볼라다 템바니 가르레 숭주스나 가르레 칭니 가르레 라운드 디이네 김신 조지기 디레 아주 가리 랍교여레스나 케랑기 따와디 약보면나 사분이 약보메바 나신데스 디니 케랑 곰디 약보여 가고여레스 따와디 약보 따지다나더니 곰디 약보 용그레스 니 김신 델라 돈에다 아주 지 베졌다 저바갸 망보 제 가샤 제대양 내가 디디래 배는 사분 약보면은 아니 행동도 전부 자두고 말해 세번 하신지는 디인디니 갑가랑 아주 따와 짜니메게 메는 검자게 망보여라 봐. 또 검잡도 초그러 봐. 또 이내한디 아니 사분 짜니 메와라디네 가와 가살라 출룩되나 다소서 남도 주는 녀마직 사분당 토기래 삼삼스러지네다 데디 찍니 용식이었다 간저 이내 갈라데 라키다고 차송아이나라 이내한다 사분이 여살라 출룩거는 마도 사분 거라면은 출룩되나 마되나 거야 끼기 말봐 다 딘데게 삼바당수 슈슈르 제자 아니 제 대삼 유누부제 가샤 유누부제에 대한테는 조어디다 오늘 단에 따와디 템포직당 약보직 용하게 되니 딜랑한 쪽이다 말하는 리소스시로와 리소스도 약보스나
Because there is this relation between these three parts, we really have to understand the sequence and the importance of it and start, first of all, with the ground or the view. In other words, here, just like with any project, we need to make sure we have really good resources. And then if we have good resources, well, it will be very easy to put the strategy into place. Otherwise, if we don't have resources, I mean, you might try to come up with some strategy, but it's not going to be really kind of helpful or relevant, right? So here the same, even like going back to the previous example of the seed, fruit tree, and then enjoying the fruits themselves. Again, there is a real correlation and importance, right? Following that kind of order from the seed to enjoying the fruits. And that's why, in Buddhism, and specifically in Tibetan Buddhism, we spend such a long time studying and analyzing, studying and learning the different philosophical tenet systems, learning what is to be refuted, what is to be affirmed, right? It could appear from outside that we're just like engaging in a very vigorous academic entertainment, sort of like, okay, those guys just spend years and years debating. Is that the case? Is that the relative truth? This is the ultimate. What is the unity? Like really taking years to resolve those things and refute and affirm and clarify and refine and analyze further and then debate. It kind of goes on and on and on. But the reason for that is really, there is a good reason. The reason is that we need to, first of all, resolve the view. That's how we resolve the view, through those kind of very vigorous studies and learning process. And then from the kind of that view, we go to meditation, to the practice, to really putting that view into practice. It's really important that, of course, there are practitioners who have not studied the view, have not really learned much, resolved the view, and then they right away jump into vigorous practice of meditation. Sure, I mean, it's allowed. There's no police that's gonna tell them, you cannot do that. Yeah, they can do that. But it is basically like not planting the seed and then taking the water and pouring it all over the field. No, you haven't planted the seed, but you're just going to pour water everywhere. Perhaps once in a blue moon, the water gonna indeed reach some kind of random seed that someone else has planted in that field. And maybe that seed gonna then grow into a tree. Great. Maybe a few lucky ones gonna hit that kind of a secret seed that they have not planted. But in reality, the chances are quite slim. So think about that just exactly like that. Those who meditate and practice a lot without really having studied, it kind of like trying to be that kind of lucky. But it's better to go in the proper order and indeed start by resolving that view. Just like by, in other words, taking care of the resources. And then that will lead to a good strategy. So again, starting with the ground, starting with the view.
gom jab yung chi dang a cha chen da zo chen la so ba kap su la luk sui ni ye song ba re ta to ni gom ba chol wa se de ta wa ngon la to ni ni gom ja be chi yang luk sui shen ba ji ye song ba re gom to ni ta wa cho wa se de ni ji ye ye chi dang tan yi de ya din zu yang chi dang ta wa ga ya me ba de ni gom jab ni kharang ta wa ni gres de ni rang ke ja ma re ta di ta wa di si di ko thar du ki ta wa se di ke ja wa 마도 타와 짜니면 검잡 디그레스 베티 돈다 말해 이는 지당 안주 림바 다오들라 따도니 검바 쳐와 당 검도니 따와 쳐와 세디 된데 숭거래 이네야 용다 당 아주 두멍 깨제 시용들다 차상디 따와 시 따와디 땐라 팝니 아니 대간로 고메데 마도 시 따와 가양 땐라 마팝니 검세디 가보 연거래 김생가르에서는 다 도도시에 봐이나 gom se du 따와 내가랑 윤경받을 쓰기를 심박하여 말해. 따와 거란 맨은 아니 윤경하여 거랍니다. 와.
When we practice Mahamudra or even great perfection, so Dzogpa Khenpo Mahamudra, there are two traditions, there are two approaches to the view and meditation. The one approach is that first you resolve the view, and then through that view you seek the you seek the practice of meditation. It's true that there is another approach. You might have heard it. We use that terminology, saying that through the practice of meditation you find the view. So yes, we say that, but we should be very careful not to misunderstand that second approach. Through practice of meditation we seek and find the view. It does not mean that when we start meditating that we do it without having any view whatsoever, like completely not knowing Buddhism and then come and meditate, okay? And then somehow miraculously the view gonna fall onto our laps. That's not the case. What this approach means is that through practice of meditation we will resolve the ultimate view, kind of final view. But when we start meditation we already have some understanding, right? We already have resolved some view. We can't. And the reason for why we can't, and it's only, right, really the way to do it, generally speaking, for most of us, is to go through the view, resolving it, and then practicing meditation. The reason is because meditation means sustaining the view. There's no other definition of meditation in the Buddha Dharma other than sustaining what we previously have ascertained. If we have not ascertained or resolved anything, what are we meditating on? What are we sustaining? Right? So need to also therefore be careful about this and understand the sequence, and these kind of traditions in the proper way.
따돌디나 먼저 시람 제부세디 시야고였나? 람야고 용그래. 시야고면나 아니 람고 사디에 내가 자르도 그래. 또도 디시고요.
In short, what I'm trying to say is when we have a very clear understanding of the kind of a real experience of unmistaking ground, our path will automatically come together nicely. And when the path is practiced correctly, meaning we're not going astray on our path, then the fruition will not, we won't wait for the fruition too long, right? When the path is practiced correctly. And so that comes from the ground, first of all. So without the ground, no path. Without path, no fruition. That's really what I'm trying to emphasize here.
그래서 다 ngazo dangbo shi se de la da samatana da de la dani do shi takche tadal dini shi den seni da dunda sum da wo jila samatan chu gore takche se de chi ro wa de chi deni 타당 달와 세트 지익지 데니 데니 세 템바니 세트 다디 가르슨 거여서나 당부디 송잖아
when the temple of sum the chikdi takche
세트 다지 차
chikche
타당 달와 세트 다지 차도와
타당 달와 소곤다 지지 알았어. So now let's look at the ground, path, and fruition one by one, basing our explanation on the verse from the Mahamudra's Privation Prayer. So we start with the first line, the one that explains the ground. The line that says it is through the ground of the two truths, free from the extremes of eternalism and nihilism. Here we can Okay, here we can highlight 3 important topics that we need to understand from this line. The first one is Eternalism and Nihilism, right? What's that? That's the one. The second one is freedom from the extremes. That's the second point that we need to look at. And the third one is, well, the 2 truths, right? So eternalism, nihilism is 1, freedom from the extremes 2, and the 2 truths is 3.
당고 딱지 세디 가르된 바리스나 시 값을라 추사디 다 랑가디니 여레스 타니디 가르레스나 딱버 따위기 타당 체버 따위기 타스 데니부디 추사기 람디레스 데니 가롱기 왕도 쇼송아이나 아니 시라 추발에 시 이게 양다고 마중 바래 데니 그 왕도 마셔바지 차고 그래스 다 추사기 람디 추사기 사제데 고사기 타디 때말에
No. The first topic here, eternalism and nihilism. At the time of the ground, those 2 are identified as 2 traps, 2 pitfalls that we need to avoid. Right? The one is known as the extreme of the view of eternalism, of everything being permanent and lasting, and another trap where we can really also fall into is the extreme of annihilation. Sometimes also we translate annihilation or nihilism, right? Falling into that extreme of nothingness whatsoever. So if we do somehow fall into either of those extremes, we are not in the middle and we have gone astray and we cannot realize the unity of the 2 truths which constitute the ground. So first of all, therefore, we have to identify and understand those 2 ways we can go astray at the time of the ground.
다 딱지 세디 지단 제바에는 디캅슬라 딱버타와 세디 가르레스나 조도키 셈지레 마임발라 임버쯤바 봐 아니 체바 세디 임발라 마임버 짐비기 로지레 봐 that's the kind of decision.
Well, to put it a bit simply, what is eternalism and nihilism? Eternalism is when we think that something is actually not the case, we think that's the case. Something that's not true, we hold it to be true and real. And nihilism is the opposite of that. Something that's actually true, we deny that validity to it and we kind of annihilate that validity and say that it's not true.
남중 아주다 남바산지베 따르게 시용되다 제바포 짐발라 따바타와탄 챙아시 레김레케 밀렘발라 체바타와 티네 남샤셔다 딘저케 카가레다 따랑 아주 냠랭케 시거와 나와게 시거 디양 예와체 고거레 당연 단다 값수바베 딱지시다 소소랑게 단다 낭데베 나와 디가랑라 니지 따지게 타당다베 냠린 제고와 송조시 어디 삼락한데 땅고 그랬어요 양치다 다 따지시디 따르게 시온데 고양 야춤베르와 따데 삼락 땅고 말해.
Again, perhaps you have encountered different definitions of what is eternalism and nihilism, especially in the context of philosophical tenet systems, like when we study those schools of philosophy in Buddhism. It is explained that eternalism, that kind of extreme view, is when we grasp to a truly existent creator, doer, right? Doer, creator. and nihilism as the view of, when someone denies the existence of the past and future lives, karma, cause and effect. These is definitions that are found at the time of resolving philosophical view. Here, however, we are not concerned, again, as I said, with kind of studying that, extensively those views and philosophies. We are more concerned with, at the time of Mahamudra practice, what it has to do with you in your life. What do you do in your life, right? It's not so much as philosophical definitions that we need to hold in mind and remember, is that eternalism, is this nihilism, but more like, what do we do in our life when situations present themselves in any particular way, when we have a strong experiences? Are we holding them as true or real or not? Again, here, eternalism, nihilism need to be seen through the lens of our personal experiences at the time of Mahamudra practice.
다 대양들이 고대부제나 단다가서 봐봐 닥치기 타서도 간지를 거지 보고 그래서는 고명도 당하랑 나와지 샤기도 와 아주 나와지 샤기 어다 와 다 단데 나랑라 낭심비게 나와딜라 아주 따수니 여주 니마도 야 말했다디 이 가장 쉬운 방가란 쪽이 니징이 셈기 오퍼레이팅 시스템디 0당 1장 말했다디 라요 말와 거기 니여다 콜라 남가 니여 다딩 세비 가르세기 그래서나 나랑기 단다기 나와지 샤르되기도 와 나와디 타직도 나와나 신 여바레 삼소나 디타직르 괜찮아 딜라 딱바타와 세겨레 다양 나랑게 다데 낭신베게 나와디 다 세네 니규니 민죽 제잠 뱃자니 메바레샤스니 타직도 메발라 파코랑 타죄샤나 디타니 바레
Once again, here, meaning at the time of meditating on Mahamudra, we need to understand eternalism and nihilism as the way we conceive of and process our experiences and conceive of appearances. And as I have mentioned in the previous Dharma sessions, there's really only two ways what our minds do when they presented with some kind of appearance, right, phenomena in our life. And why only two ways? Well, because that's the operating system of our dualistic mindset. Either 0 or 1, right, computer system. It doesn't have a third option. Our dualistic mind that grasps the duality also has only these two choices. The one, when we are presented with some kind of appearance, our mind grasps to it and sees it exactly as it appears, meaning it believes that the true nature of this appearance is exactly, as it presents itself. This appearance basically is taken at face value, and that is the view of eternalism in the context of Mahamudra practice. Another second choice that our minds make sometimes when there's this kind of appearances that arise, the mind deny any existence of that appearance whatsoever. It's like it's not at all there. There's no appearance, period. That is the other extreme of nihilism.
The interesting the 가르치기에서나 니가 디 골바레 숭바레 너바레 슬라바르다 0 데 너바레 안기 당부데 너바레 슬라바레 옵션 숨바지레 슬라바레 딜라 가르치기에서나 숭죽 슬라바레 니가 마임바지레 슬라바레 딜라 숭죽 슬라바레 다디 안주기 삼땅트베 야마레 페나 penna kerangi operating system de la jik sumba jitena khogi di ngoshe thuk marwa ritje thuk marwa ndi nge khajang ma shi sungjuk se di ko chikde peju tangre de ngoni china chikdi ngajula chikdi chik cha thuk mar karesen namdo ji sha thuk mar lola.
What's interesting about it is that both of those ways are wrong. It's basically like our operating system has these two ways, two modes of being, 0 and 1, and it's actually neither 0 nor 1. Oops. So what's happening? Actually, there is a third option called unity, which is neither of the previous two choices, previous two options. But you see, our operating system can't even read third option because it can only read 0 and 1. It can't read it. So as I have mentioned, we do use the word unity. We say it out loud, we use it. But when we say it, there's no image, there's no understanding that comes together with that word. And therefore, according to Buddhist epistemology, it's not even qualified as a real word because every word has to bring is attached to some concept that we conceive of when we utter or hear the word. But this word we say, but nothing, like our minds, nothing is there. We can't really read it.
The possibility sumba bindwa namjung aranzu semgi lega jedu. Tachik du yoba sungwa, tachik du mepa sungwa. Ta de nika res laba ne de le kyang duzu rugwa. Tene lamsa ngazu kawa jegrwa. Kar resena ta de yongora sigi mare sen tacho sare. Kari chini tacho resena de ngazu hakoyo mare. Su tacho ena.
Gonda sigi duru joson tama sigi mare.
Nika res yeme nika res labna deve kyang duru rugwa. Ta nika yimba chi sigi mare sen tim ji so shadwa tacho jo shadwa. As a reality. That is sweet touch about it said and to suggest how we are.
Ah, that's so difficult. Okay. So that's how our minds are, our ordinary minds. Either something for, from the perspective of this kind of ordinary mind we operate from, is either things are completely truly existent or they completely non-existent. And if we are told that there's this kind of unity, kind of like, this dance, they kind of exist, but really don't, it makes things worse for our ordinary mind. Like, it's like, what? We have decided that it's not possible. Like, right from beginning, we decided there's no third option. It's not possible. If we really question, but who decided it? Who decided it's not possible? We don't even know. Who decided that?
That decola and the Chajimalan Korangi Nani pay ninja which is somewhere. Dini the Nanzuki that Taji the Galgi race and Tajo Sharwa and the Galgi Mares. Magalwa de la Caris Sigurs and Umas and Sigures. The option Sumbatilla. The Nanzu Malam Nala. Yoba mine, Kave Gammasik, Meba mine, Korde Kunjishis, Galdu mine, Sunju Umelam, Tadal Simgi Chungin Topper Show, so instead sooner.
And about this unity is really beautifully explained in the Mahamudra Aspiration Prayer that we really that unity that we decided somehow pre-decided that couldn't be the case. In reality, it's called the middle path, right? And as the Mahamudra Aspiration Prayer says, it is not existent, as even the Buddhas have not seen it. It is not non-existent, as it is the basis of all samsara and nirvana. And this is not a contradiction, as it is the middle way of unity. May we realize the true nature of mind, free from extremes. So yes, Khenpo mentioned earlier, this is not a contradiction. For us, it is, for ordinary mind, but in reality, it's not a contradiction. It is the middle way. It is the unity.
당이 누나 도도 가르친 거 그랬으나 안 가르치고 그랬으나 대갑솔라 딱체세디 소소 냠내나 자온데 타직도 여버 짐바텔라 딱버다 왔어요 그래 남도텔라 타직도 매버 짐바텔라 제버다 왔어요 그래 아니 다 데니 가능게 초소 롱나 송주 많이 받자서 그래 아니 다 남주 가주 딜라 타니 가르 비슷한 거래 낭라 랑신 마투 파스 타니데 비슷한 거와 낭와레 스니 광도 쇼니 랑신 마투 바레 세다 락송 와이나 딱바타와 차라롱 소바레 랑신 마투 바레 세데 삼로코니 낭와스 락송 바이나 제바타와 차라롱 소바레
In short, to understand these two extreme views, eternalism and nihilism. Eternalism is when we take things to be really truly existent, and nihilism when we think they're completely non-existent, right? And in reality, it's neither of those two, and it's the unity. But if we fall into either trap of it's really real or it's not at all, well, it's not a unity then. Then we haven't realized the unity. So, and to kind of check if we really falling into any of this extreme or not, we have a formula, like a statement such as things do appear, but while they appear, they are not truly existent. Right? Things appear, but they lack true existence. So if we somehow lose the part of not truly existent and just have the first one, things appear, that we are in the view of eternalism, in the extreme view of eternalism. If we lose the first part of this statement, right, things appear, but we lose that and it's but not truly existent and only stick with that one, that's the extreme of nihilism. So both, right, it appears, and while it appears, it is empty. So that's when we don't fall into either extreme.
인도 똥초바당 똥신도 낭초바세 니부딜라 가와 민도 삼비 딘데기 뇌렌 제토바이나 데니 송주 쓰는 딜세거래
While things appear, they are at the same time are allowed to be empty, not true and solid. And while they are lacking any solidity and true existence, they are allowed to appear. And if we really don't see a contradiction there, then that's the unity right there. We have got it.
다디 제 고와 잠지 마임바 뇽웨게 고니 뇌렌 제토바 주고가 다 소설라디 율딘도 태용도
But not just got it meaning like intellectually, but really, really accepted it. So that when things happen to us, we really live that truth of the unity.
미지기 계란라 어디 계란배 갸과도서 라비티네배 나 같이제 갸과도 나래 계란 갸과도세로 망고 삼lokor 되거라 간주 근데 다 근데 지 삼lokor 송와이나 되는 간주 송주기 냠는 제 마도 바래 다 근데기 측지 측상보이나리 측년바이나라와 암졸로 고용도 값을라 아니 칙 고에도 고송대 있는 다디 랑시 마투 바레 세지 당보 세컨 카실라디티 주지 가기로와 가야 가죽 아니야 디젤라더니 스토리 시라 메와지니 대랑 참샤수 투바이나 투지체슬랍 참샤 투바이나 다디 되니 나동 순주 냠는 지 다제바라고 체거다
So we really need to apply this this truth of the the unity in our lives, not just intellectually understand it, to the point that when someone tells us, wow, you have really gained weight, look at you, oh, so fat these days, we don't spin into the narrative. Well, usually what happens, we do spin into some kind of story in our head. Well, yes, I gain weight, now I look fatter, more than you, this and blah, blah, blah. Then this is not unity, it's gone, right? And this is not only about bad words, also good ones. When we hear them, right, if we get a compliment, and we do hear it and we process, we can't close and block ourselves and pretend we don't hear. This is not the practice here, but really we hear it. And for a few seconds even, we might have a feeling like we get triggered, and if we like what we hear, we're like, And if it stops right there, meaning we don't go into any kind of storytelling, if we don't spin into any kind of narrative and this and that, this is it. We just say thanks. Yeah, oh, nice compliment, thanks, and we move on. That's already, that's how unity of appearance and emptiness works on a daily basis. Right there, right? In our lives, in daily lives.
다 단지 미기 소소라 칭엠바지 라운디 베 셈나데나 다 칙텐데 오네 다니 코 칸이랑 랍송 나랑 랍송 삼니 셈라 냐데나 딱버다와 잘룽바레 가야선디 딘디 오네 다 여발을 예베타를 룽어바 다양 또 졸업종도 장 드니 삼로티 디스타니 다 오네 다니 가야 민두 삼니 드니 다 칙동바레 스니 미차상라 교란 약바도 칙니 동바레 가야 마레스 돈이레스니 요즘에 차상라 약바도 슬랍도 샤바니 제버타를 룽바레.
So when someone tells us something unpleasant, harsh, if we react in our minds and, okay, this person said to me, okay, and we hold all of that for a while, kind of grasping in our minds that was said to me, there's real rigidity there. That's the extreme of eternalism, because we already take that appearance and solidify it. If, however, perhaps we have studied usually some kind of philosophy, and we, upon hearing something unpleasant, we go into analysis and say and decide, well, really, it's really non-existent at all. All is just mere words. There's nothing behind it whatsoever. Everything is empty. It doesn't matter. And start walking around and tell everyone they're fat. Who cares, right? It's all emptiness. So you're fat, and you're fat, and you're fat. That's already another extreme, okay? When we decided nothing matters. And that's the extreme of nihilism.
라소 다 도르디나 만주 실람 됐음 세되 시 아니 다들인 시골을 쉬바래 아니 시디 다시기 타니당 다와지 인고거레스 난 다시기 탈롱나 아주 셈발라 녀모마보게 되게 셈마토바스거레 다드니 게치쇼텔라 다시기 타시르 지당 따두기 값을라 다다미나 망보여레 고알린당 이네 양당 안한 소소소소라 뇽와라 자니 냠린지 용도 다가스바바 차젠라서베 값을라더니 딱바르타와당 제버타와 세디 타찍도 여버쯤바당 타찍도 멤버쯤비 남도텔라 다다당 제다세요레 데니기 왕도 도요 마레스 길레테바 투바스코 그레스 딜라가레세거스나 낭라 랑신 마토파스네 세요레스 디슈바레.
Okay, so today we have looked at what is the ground. Most importantly, the ground, which is the unity of two truths, is the freedom from two extremes. Well, most importantly, what we have learned today is this kind of importance of not falling into either extreme of eternalism and nihilism. Because if we do fall into those kind of ideas, then our minds get really disturbed with a lot of afflictions and difficult emotions. So again, another point that I emphasized is that we can talk about eternalism and nihilism in the context of Buddhist views and philosophies and give lengthy explanations and definitions, but here we are not concerned with that approach. We are interested in terms of all our real daily life, our personal experiences, and the practice of Mahamudra in our life. How then, what do we do, what happens when we fall into the trap of eternalism, when we think things do really have existence, or we fall into this, extreme of nihilism when we deny any kind of existence whatsoever, and how to important also to avoid that, right? I kind of emphasize the importance of remaining in the middle. What means in the middle? Always remember this very good formula that you can use with all appearances and experiences. It does appear, and while it appears, it lacks any true existence or solidity whatsoever. So that's for today.
Janju semju rimbo che mage ba nama ge gyure che ge ba nyambara me ba yang gone gondo belvare sho